he like started off with a bang. He just came right out and admitted to committing financial crimes. He was asked if he committed financial crimes. He said yes. He was then asked, who did you commit those crimes with? He said Sam Bankman-Fried, Caroline Ellison, and Nishad Singh. So
Wow.
that was the beginning of his testimony, and it was just a very blatant admission.
This content is brought to you by Link2, which makes private equity investment easy. Link2 is a great platform that allows you to get equity in companies before they go public, before they do an IPO. Within their portfolio includes crypto companies, AI companies, and fintech companies. Some of the crypto companies you may recognize include Circle, Ripple, Chainalysis, Ledger, Dapper Labs, and many more. If you'd like to learn more about Link2, please visit the link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me is Tiffany Fong, and we're going to talk about the latest with the Sam Bankman-Fried trial and FTX, as well as Celsius. Tiff, great to have you back on.
Good to be back. It's been a while.
For sure. So, Tiff, you've been boots on the ground. I don't know how you have the time to go and do these things with, following Sam and the trial and everything. But I'm glad you are, because we're getting some really good, accurate information. So, what were your major takeaways from this past week as the trial started and you had Sam Bankman-Fried's closest friends testifying against him?
Yeah. Okay. So last week was the first week of Sam Bankman-Fried's criminal trial. I'm here in New York City to watch it live because it won't be televised. There's no electronic devices allowed into the courtroom, which has been very difficult because I'm away from my phone all day and I'm having withdrawals. But this week we first had opening statements. So we got to just hear a little glimpse into each side's general argument. And I will say that the prosecution has a much easier case. It's much more cut and dry. They're basically like, look at this guy. This guy stole money from FTX customers, sent it to his sister trading firm, used that to make speculative investments, as well as to enrich his own life by buying Bahamian real estate, by flying on private jets, making donations to politicians and to charities, etc. So they have a really straightforward, clean explanation of their argument. And Sam's side has a bit of a tougher time. Their argument is a bit more convoluted, and it kind of feels like they're grasping at straws right now because, they're basically saying, look, this was a startup essentially, so every one of these decisions made sense at the time. They were each individually reasonable business decisions, and it was basically like trying to build a plane while flying it, is basically like the argument that they kept stating, and saying that if you look back in hindsight, it might look bad, but at the time, like, none of this was fraudulent. He never had fraudulent intent, etc. And even if that's true, like, that's a much more difficult argument to try to get across to a jury rather than like, look, $8.7 billion are gone, So it seems like they're already like, I can't really imagine them crawling out of that hole. The defense's lawyers also were trying to bring up sort of more difficult to understand topics, I would assume, for a jury who, they intentionally selected this jury because they don't know too much about the case or have strong opinions about it. So they're bringing up things like there was a margin trading facility. And, I don't know that the average person would know too much about margin trading. I personally have never even margin traded. So I know what it is, but I don't even know too much about it. So anyways, that's the general gist of their opening statements. Then we got to see some very interesting testimonies from, I think we've had 4 witnesses so far. One was a cocoa bean trader. Another was Matt Wang, who was the co-founder of Paradigm, so an investor. But I think the most interesting testimonies so far have been from Adam Yedidia and Gary Wang, who were both 2 of Sam's closest friends and who have known Sam for a very long time. So Gary Wang obviously is Sam's friend that he's known all the way back since high school math camp. Sam actually sent me almost 300 pages of his personal writings over house arrest, because I've interviewed him over house arrest multiple times. So he's explained like how he first met Gary Wang at math camp. His strongest memory of Gary Wang was baking Gary Wang and Sam Trabucco baking cheesecake brownies at math camp. So they go way back, obviously really close friends, but obviously are now testifying against him. So I think I remember Gary Wang's testimony a little bit more clearly because that was the most recent. And obviously, he's one of the three key witnesses. The other two key witnesses are Nishad Singh and Caroline Ellison. So Gary Wang, was sort of a mysterious figure before all of this. No one knew too much about him. He didn't have a social media. He didn't do interviews, and there was hardly any pictures of him. But I got to see him in real life at trial, and he started off with a bang. He just came right out and admitted to committing financial crimes. He was asked if he committed financial crimes. He said yes. He was then asked, who did you commit those crimes with? He said, Sam Bankman-Fried, Caroline Ellison, and Nishad Singh. Wow. So that was the beginning of his testimony, and it was just a very blatant admission. And he's also already pled guilty to I think 4 charges of fraud. So let's see. There were several moments of him just obviously pointing out that Alameda was given special privileges, and he was the developer, so he was coding those special privileges under the direction of Sam Bankman-Fried, according to Gary Wang. And he pointed out some sort of damning lies that Sam had made over time. So there was one special privilege, I think, called allow negative, which basically allowed Alameda to take off more funds than they had in their FTX account and just go into the negatives. And Gary said that Sam initially wanted that code to be put in place. I think I have it in my notes, but apparently to pay for FTT related expenses and something to do with USD pegged coins. But Sam apparently is the person who allegedly asked for this allow negative code to be put in place. And that was put in place on July 31st, 2019. And it was just really funny because one of the exhibits that the court just showed to all of us was that on that very same day, Sam tweeted in response to someone asking if there was maybe any sort of conflict of interest between FTX and Alameda. He tweeted, and I can pull it up because I actually screenshotted the tweet. Sure. Afterwards, I screenshotted afterwards because we don't have electronic devices. But he said, Alameda is the liquidity provider on FTX, but their account is just like everyone else's. Alameda's incentive is just for FTX to do as well as possible. By far, the dominant factor is helping to make the trading experience as good as possible. But he blatantly tweeted Alameda's account is just like everyone else's on the exact day that he asked Gary Wang to implement code that would make Alameda's account obviously not just like everyone else's. So that just seems like a really brazen lie. And Gary Wang's testimony was sort of full of just pointing out these brazen lies alongside screenshots.
Oh man, it sounds like Sam is going to get buried, and then Caroline, she's going to be up in this week. Is it?
Yes, I think that she's supposed to be testifying on Tuesday. We're all sort of guessing at that. It seems sort of, I've never seen a criminal trial before, but it almost seems like odd to use up the 3 top witnesses in the very beginning, because there's only been 4 days of trial and it's supposed to last for 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm sort of after you use up Caroline, Gary, and Nishad, I don't know, all the rest of the testimonies sound like they're going to be very boring. Right. But yeah, apparently she's supposed to testify very soon. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard, and these are a bit of speculation and hearsay, I know Sam tried to put out her diary, if I'm not mistaken. I can imagine she's probably not happy about that. Plus, she was hands-on at Alameda. She's going to have a lot to say.
Oh, yeah, I think she'll know the most out of anybody. And obviously they had sort of a checkered past and a volatile relationship. Not necessarily volatile, but apparently Sam has told me that they didn't end on the best of terms. And there were even points, I think, that we just fully weren't talking while they were supposed to sort of be working alongside each other. Wow. So I'm very excited to see what she has to say.
So how does Sam look? I mean, obviously you've met Sam, you've spoken to him. Has his demeanor, how does he look, overall?
Good question, because, well, during house arrest, since he didn't have much to do, he was telling me I've just been overeating so much. So I think over house arrest, sort of gained a little bit of weight. I know that he started to feel a little bit self-conscious about that. I don't think it was because of how he looked, but he was just saying that he was starting to feel more sluggish because he was gaining weight. So he gained weight over house arrest. Then he's been in MDC jail because he leaked some of Caroline Ellison's diary to the New York Times. He also showed me that diary while I was visiting him
Yeah.
previously. But he got sent to jail for potentially witness tampering. And now he looks like he's sort of lost a little bit of weight because he doesn't have all the food that he has at his parents' house. Like when he was at his parents' house, he was constantly eating, constantly snacking on like vegan popcorn and vegan jerky. But now he doesn't have that. And according to like articles, because I haven't spoken to him since he's gotten placed in jail, apparently he's just eating bread and water since like there aren't a lot of vegan options in jail. But it looks like he's lost weight on that diet, and he also got a haircut. So the like frizzy, unkempt locks are sort of gone, and apparently that haircut was from a fellow MDC prison inmate. So maybe he's getting along with them in prison. I'm surprised because he's so awkward, but maybe he's getting along with some people because he got a haircut. But like honestly, I would say like he almost looks a little more criminal now. Like the whole like unkempt locks made him look a little bit more childish, which might maybe work to his advantage to look a little more like innocent. And
Great
now it's
point.
sort of like, yeah, and it's very like clean cut lines. And like when I first saw him, I was like, yeah, he looks more criminal than he did before.
It'd be interesting if he got like a prison tattoo or something.
I would love to see him get a prison tattoo, maybe one teardrop. That'd be great.
Oh my gosh. So, Tiff, I mean, this sounds like this guy is going to get buried. It's just a matter of how long. He's going to get like a life sentence. Who knows? What does your gut tell you? And then that's a hard question.
God, I mean, it's sort of like I'm not going to say sad. I just like feel almost bad for how like delusional Sam has been during house arrest, because I've asked him multiple times, like, do you think there's any shot you get out of this scot-free? And Sam has answered, I mean, I think it's probably like under 50% chance. But he was giving himself a nearly 50% likelihood of getting 0 jail time.
Wow.
And I've also asked him things like, Sam, would you take a plea deal? And he said, oh, I don't think that they would like offer me anything reasonable. I would only take something like a few years on house arrest. So like these are the things that in his mind while he was on house arrest,
Wow.
these are the things he was sort of preparing for, which I think is sadly a bit, well, I don't mean sadly, but it's just like it's weirdly delusional.
Oh, sure.
So I don't think he's prepared for what's coming, because like I don't see how he crawls himself out of this hole right now. And I would imagine like it'd be tough to imagine less than 10 years, especially given the amount of money that's gone. I think that typically sentences do factor in the amount of money that has been stolen. And I think that the rankings stop at something like it's either 100 million or 500 million, but like nowhere near the $8.7 billion that has been taken. So I think he's probably in for a long sentence unless he manages to just turn the whole thing around. I think that the prosecution they said that their case will be about 4 weeks, and then I think Sam's case will be made within 2 weeks. So unless he can dig himself out of this in the last 2 weeks of this, I think he's sort of fucked, or sort of screwed. And also, I just don't think his lawyers have been doing too good a job. And they also, I'm sure they just don't have a lot of material to work with. But
sure.
We haven't seen them like make their case, but we've seen them in cross-examinations. And the questions they're asking the witnesses are just sort of repetitive of what has already been said. Like they got up and were cross-examining Gary Wang. And some of their questions were just like, so you went to MIT. So you went to summer camp with Sam. And it was just the judge, you could see the judge just visibly getting irritated. And he was just, at some point, the judge was just like, all right, can we cut to the chase? Like, can we get to the point? Like, and he even like cut court like 10 minutes early because he was just like, these questions are getting repetitive. It feels like you're just trying to run out the clock. So we're just going to cut. So it just doesn't seem like the judge is getting very irritated with the defense, and it doesn't seem like they have a lot to work with.
Oh yeah, I bet. I mean, because I don't know how do you even cross-examine these witnesses? Because the fact that they knew Sam for so long, they were working with him, and now they're saying, hey, look, yeah, we were all working, doing scam, fraud, and all that. How do you argue against that?
Exactly. They're in a very tough spot, I would say. So it's not looking so good for Sam. That's my general takeaway is that it's not looking so good for Sam.
So, Sam's delusion, as you alluded to, is that kind of what led to his downfall? That he built this great brand, he did all these business partnerships and sponsorships and much more. Yet, there was issues behind the curtain that nobody knew, but he didn't recognize to say, "Hey, I need to file for Chapter 11, or I need to switch. I need to bring somebody professional in to help us get this steer the ship right." Is it that
Yeah.
same delusion that he felt he could dig his way out of this hole?
I honestly think it is that same delusion. And he also just generally, like, in my conversations with him, I can tell that he just does not tend to take advice from anyone else. He doesn't tend to listen to conventional wisdom. I'm sure that people have pointed out while he was working at FTX and Alameda, or owned the companies, that like maybe you should have a board, maybe you should, get someone to be in charge of risk. But I think he just tends to think like he's the smartest guy in the room. Like he tends to just think he's better than people, I would say. And yeah, I just don't think he took advice from anyone and thought that he was the smartest guy and that everything would end up working out. And it appears through testimonies that he was aware that there was a possibility that FTX customer funds were being used, and it just doesn't seem like there was any care in the world that, like, I don't know, he was just didn't seem concerned at all.
That's so strange. And I'm sure criminal psychologists and all these people are going to want to study him, and they'll probably do papers on him, like,
Yes.
depending on, I don't know what category he fits in, but
Yeah.
I'm sure he's going to be yeah.
I think he has some elements of, I don't want to diagnose him as someone who's not a clinical therapist, but like probably some elements of maybe sociopathy. I've actually asked him that in person in interviews. He said that he doesn't think he's a sociopath, but also it'd be really crazy if he was just like, yeah, I'm a sociopath. But he's been like, I probably exhibit like some of the traits. Like he's admitted he might exhibit some of the traits, and I would say that he has said in our conversation that he has difficulty feeling empathy for others. But he said that he can logically understand other people's emotions, but it doesn't sound like he like necessarily instinctively feels empathy, which is, I think, a trait of sociopathy, but is also a trait of some other things. Like I think that might be a trait of autism as well. So I can't diagnose him, but I think he exhibits maybe some traits of maybe some problematic disorders.
Now, when you went to meet him, did you by any chance speak to his parents? Because there's some involvement here. Obviously, we don't have the full facts. And were they aware of anything that was happening? All the fraudulent activity?
Yeah, obviously a lot has been coming out about his parents, and there's now a lawsuit being filed against them from the FTX debtors. And it seems like to some degree, it seems like they sort of strong-armed Sam into giving them more money than he was initially going to. Like there was a piece in the lawsuit that said that Sam's dad complained that he was only getting $200,000 salary per year, and was saying, I thought it was going to be $1 million, which is insane.
Wow.
And apparently he was like, I'm going to get Barbara, your mom, on this email. And apparently then Sam proceeded to send them millions of dollars. So to some degree, like, I think that like they sort of strong-armed him into some pieces of it. I don't want to like outright accuse them of anything without knowing too much about what happened there. But I haven't had a full-blown conversation with them. A few times during our interviews, they'd like, his mom or dad would pop their head into the little study that we'd be sitting in, and then see that I'm there, and then be like, shut the door. And I think his dad once walked me into the house because his dad was standing outside with our new guard dog named Sandor, and saw that I was entering, so he walked me inside. But I've tried to introduce myself. I've tried to be like, hi, I'm Tiffany. It's nice to meet you. They don't seem too talkative, don't seem to really want to chat with me, which makes sense because honestly, Sam probably shouldn't have been talking to anybody either. So I'm not personally offended, but they haven't been too talkative with me.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of stuff coming out about them. And maybe, obviously we don't have the facts, so we're just speculating, but they didn't know about all the fraudulent commingling and everything, but they were probably like, Sam, we see you paying Tom Brady and Steph Curry. Come on, send us some more money, right?
Yeah, very true, very true. So that could be the case.
Now, author Michael Lewis was interviewed by 60 Minutes, and he seemed to make some very favorable comments about Sam and FTX, almost saying like this was a legit business. And everybody on crypto Twitter is like, this is bullshit. What were your thoughts on that?
Everyone is very angry. Yeah, I haven't read Michael's full book. I started reading Going Infinite. I watched the 60 Minutes interview. Obviously Michael's a smart guy, and honestly, probably a smarter guy than me. Like, I'm not someone who pretends to be an expert in like financial anything. So I feel bad being the person to like criticize him. But I think that like a few of his statements were obviously quite questionable. I think he said something like, if no one had cast aspersions on FTX, they'd still be a thriving, profitable business, which to me is just like, dude, obviously now that everything's been exposed, like it's very clear that there were serious problems lurking beneath the surface. Right. So yes, I think that FTX itself was probably a profitable business if Sam were to just have sit on his hands and not taken a bunch of customer funds and moved them to Alameda Research. So I mean, some of those statements like that, I'm just kind of like cringing listening to. I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, Sam can be convincing. I mean, Sam like has obviously said, like, given me excuses for every single thing that went wrong at Alameda. And obviously tough to believe him, but I will say, obviously, like, as someone who wasn't there myself, I wasn't working at Alameda or FTX. If I was to give him any sort of benefit of the doubt and listen to his statements, it's not like he's denying that customer funds ended up at Alameda, but he's given me reasons and justifications for why they were, ethically fine decisions at the time. For example, Alameda's line of credit was heightened to $65 billion at one point, which was obviously far more than any other market maker. But Sam gave me his reasoning for why that happened. He said that obviously FTX was started in 2019, and in the very beginning, Alameda was the primary market maker and liquidity provider for FTX. So like they had to input some special privileges so that both of the companies didn't just blow out if there were issues. So I'm no expert on these sort of companies, but it kind of makes sense why in the very beginning maybe you would implement some code that gave some special privileges just to avoid both of your companies collapsing if something happened. I don't fully understand it, but I can maybe understand that. And maybe some of these special privileges weren't put in place for nefarious reasons, just to siphon off all of your customer funds and use them for your own purposes. It's just like, obviously that code could have been changed. Obviously you were aware that those special privileges were in place. So it seems more like you could have just turned a blind eye to some of the things that were going on. But so it's tough because maybe some of these things weren't nefarious in the beginning, but they obviously turned into what turned out to be the demise of both companies and wrecking so many people's lives. So yeah, I can understand So that's the thing. Even me, I have like sort of a complex view in terms of like, I don't necessarily think that he set out intentionally to hurt people, but that was the outcome of all of his decisions. So
yeah, and it kind of goes back to the delusional part. Like I think he had good intentions. He started a great business. Look, the FTX platform is great. I used it, and at one point I was looking to work with them and even send them my resume and things like that. Because they were growing at such a rapid pace, obviously getting huge partnerships. And I know, from the people I've been talking to in DC and the Blockchain Association, they were saying Sam was walking the halls in DC a lot. I mean, he was there than more than any other crypto CEO. And he was trying to get like certain licenses, special dealer, broker license and all that. So I think he was trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, that delusion, I think, as the cards started falling apart behind the scenes, he was like, oh, let me keep pumping it over there, trying to save
it. Totally. That's sort of my sense too. And I know people get frustrated by like anyone saying like, oh, it just kid that got in over his head. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case. Like, obviously, he like, he implemented a lot of this code, and he, I don't know, like, it's not necessarily the case. But yeah, I also don't think that it was like nefarious from the beginning.
For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I think he was certainly trying to build a legit business, but he didn't run it the right way, and yeah, things got out of control. The other
definitely.
factor too, and this is a lot of criticism around CZ and Binance and the BNB token. Look, we're still in the early realms of the crypto market, and I'm personally skeptical of these like centralized exchange tokens because of the nature of how centralized it is and how connected it is to the business. In the bear market,
Definitely.
we could have seen that FTT token possibly crash, and that could have exposed Sam, ahead of
Yeah,
all these things happening. So,
very true. Very true.
but we'll see.
Probably would have just bought more of it to keep the price up, though, I bet.
True, or borrow against it and to kind of prop it up, and who knows?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he would have done something like that.
Now, your YouTube channel got demonetized. You've been covering the case, doing Twitter
Yeah.
Spaces, and putting the content here, but it seems like YouTube screwed you over here.
Yeah. I've never had any issues with that before. I have no copyright strikes, but I don't know what triggered this demonetization. I think the one thing that I did differently this week was that since I'm so strapped for time, I've been getting to court at like 7 a.m. and then leaving at like 5. So I have like no time to do anything. So I've been just doing Twitter spaces after court each day, and also filming those Twitter spaces and so that I get video footage, posting that on YouTube, and also posting that footage on Twitter as well. So I'm wondering if like, because I'm posting on two platforms, if YouTube's just algorithm senses that like this footage exists somewhere else out there on the internet and assumes that I'm stealing it from someone, because it got demonetized for reusing content. And like, I don't steal anyone else's content and like promote it as my own ever. So I'm wondering if something like that triggered the system. But in any case, I got demonetized. So I've moved myself to New York City, don't work for anyone, and making no salary, but I'm just like heavily invested in this case. So I just really want to see what happens. But I'm no longer making any money on YouTube for it.
Well, I'll try to help you out because I had my own problems with YouTube where they
Mm.
deleted my channel at one point. So we'll talk
Oh,
offline. Yeah.
okay. That'd be helpful. Yes, I need help. And if
Um,
anyone wants to follow me elsewhere on my other platforms, well, I have my YouTube still, and I'll still post on there, but I also mostly use Twitter now. So Tiffany Fong with one underscore, and then I have a Substack at tiffanyfong.substack.com.
I'll put all those links in the description, so everybody go check them out.
Thanks.
Now, you were also part of the BBC documentary recently on FTX, right?
Yes. Yes.
Was that just, I saw the Mooch was part of it, a bunch of other people. Kevin O'Leary kind of skipped out on it. I was surprised, but how was that?
Yes. That was fun. Yeah, I was in a BBC documentary. They filmed that several months ago, and it was super awkward to film just because they wanted to get shots of me walking towards Sam Bankman-Fried's house, but that obviously wasn't during like one of the times that Sam had invited me to come to the house. So it was just really uncomfortable. They made me like redo the same slow motion walk towards Sam's house, and I was just like, if Sam like sees me through his window just randomly outside of his house, like he's gonna think I'm literally like stalking him.
With the
So it
cameras
was
and
really
everything.
uncomfortable.
Oh my
It's very
God.
uncomfortable. But yeah, it was otherwise it was fun. They rented me like a nice fake Airbnb. People like watched the doc and thought that I'm like secretly super rich, but I'm like they rented me an Airbnb for one day and made it look like it was mine. But it was fun to film.
Oh, that's awesome. So I got to ask about Celsius and Mashinsky because you and I, up over a year now, we spoke about,
Yeah.
and we were waiting for Mashinsky to be put into jail as well.
Yeah.
What is the latest there that you can tell us?
Yeah, so I have, since I'm so entrenched in the SBF stuff right now, I haven't read the latest articles on Mashinsky, but he was finally indicted. I'm blanking on if that's the right word. But Mashinsky was finally charged with fraud. And it's been over a year. So like just taking the comparison, Celsius collapsed in July of 2022, and it took over a year for Mashinsky to get charged with anything. FTX, on the other hand, collapsed in November, and Sam was arrested within, I think, like less than a month of the collapse. So they moved really quickly with Sam, but watching Mashinsky was just like watching paint dry because nothing was happening there. And we were all wondering if he was even going to get charged, but finally got charged. I believe he's currently in house arrest in his multi-million dollar penthouse in Manhattan that he likely used customer funds to buy. So I'm sure he's not struggling too much, but he's, I think, on house arrest.
So I remember you and BitBoy, Ben Armstrong, you guys met him at a conference and you went and sat like next to him.
Yeah.
It was the most hilarious thing. He looked so uncomfortable.
He was so uncomfortable. I mean, he definitely knows who I am just because I've been messing with Alex Mashinsky for almost a year now, and I've just every day I tweet him obscenities. Well, not now anymore, but during the beginning I was tweeting him very mean, vulgar obscenities every single day, leaking information about the company. So he knew who I was, and I just plopped down next to him with BitBoy at NFT NYC, and he just looked so uncomfortable. And Chrissy Mashinsky was speaking there, which I think is quite appalling.
I mean,
I don't know how that was.
Where did he get the balls to do that? Like, I would be hiding. Like,
but that's the thing. In public, like, so many people were commenting, and they were like, "You were too soft on him. How were you not yelling at him?" Like, in public settings, like, no one is yelling at him. A lot of people recognized who Alex and Chrissy were. No one said a single mean thing to them. I even saw people come up and shake their hands, and were just like, "Hey, nice to meet you," and introducing themselves very politely. So like people were getting mad that I wasn't like throwing things at them, but I'm like, we're in a public setting, guys. Like no one's doing that. If anything, I was like, BitBoy and I were probably the harshest towards him there, to the point where we were like sort of chasing and following them out, and they had to call their security guards to like get rid of us. But that was fun. And I actually have more like personal beef with Chrissy Mashinsky, because Alex Mashinsky, like, he's certainly blocked me and knows who I am, but he's never like explicitly like posted about me on social media. Chrissy Mashinsky's made several posts about me. I don't know if a lot of people might not know my background, but I leaked a lot of information about Celsius that I received from employees who follow me on social media. And Chrissy has posted accusing me of hacking into Celsius's systems. She's also accused me of breaking into her home, which is absolutely just completely delusional. Wow. I'm kind of like, another accusation she made was that I apparently helped Sam Bankman-Fried bribe Chinese government officials. And I'm like, of all of Sam's charges, you decided to accuse me of helping him bribe Chinese government officials. I'm like, that seems very clearly racist. Like, very clearly
racist. My gosh, she's crazy.
So
I saw some of her tweets towards you. Yeah,
I'm almost just like, can I press charges against this woman? Like, that's just clear.
Probably you could, yeah.
Maybe. And she owes me money.
You can get some of that money back plus more.
Right? Well, they spent I don't know if you saw this, but they spent over $70,000 of basically customer funds. But Celsius itself spent over $70,000 debating whether or not to sue me or pursue me legally. I don't know if you saw that, but that was just like the Celsius legal team spent lots of money deciding whether or not to sue me for leaking information. But I'm kind of sitting here and I'm like, I was never an employee. I never broke an NDA, so they don't really have too many grounds for that.
You're just a whistleblower.
Exactly. Yeah. So they spent all that money, I think, talking to lawyers to figure out if they could sue me, and probably ultimately got the answer, no, you don't really have like much to stand on here. So they just wasted our funds, and they owe me about, I think at current prices in the bear market, it's about $100,000. So I'm kind of like, you could have just gave that back to me, but instead you sent it just on a frivolous legal litigation that didn't end up amounting to anything, because they didn't end up suing me.
Yeah, I hope Mashinsky goes to jail too, man. Because I used to have Alex on a lot of my podcasts, and he was lying straight to my face. And I remember one of the last interviews before all these things came out, he looked very nervous. Like I don't think he realized he was going to speak to me. I think he was probably making the rounds, but it was a very different Alex. I was like, wow, this is kind of strange. This guy's usually warm and excited, and he just seemed very like low energy and like, very like clammish. Like he didn't want to answer certain questions. And I'm like, now in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, I see what was going on.
Yeah. How soon was it before the collapse?
Man, maybe a month or so he was making the rounds, if I remember correctly, and trying to get people to prop up the sell token.
Wow.
So, but it was a different Alex, and I couldn't tell, why. I was like, oh, he's probably having a bad day or something. But now I look back, oh,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah,
I mean, honestly, I'm probably biased because I lost money to Celsius and I didn't lose money to FTX. But I honestly feel like Alex just feels like a more sinister,
yes,
evil guy. Like I think actually might have had like intent, and he knew the whole time. Like,
yeah,
for example, like the yields they were paying us were not connected to any real number. They were just paying those to compete with competitors, and like I think they knew for a really long time that they were losing money. Like for some reason, I don't know if it's just because I'm biased because I lost money to Celsius, but he just feels more evil to me. I'm not saying that Sam is innocent by any means,
sure,
but but I don't know. I hate the guy even more. Like,
yeah,
really.
no. I absolutely agree with you. I think that's a fair assessment, because Alex was knowingly going and promoting it. Like he was just going, yeah, come put your money and sell. You'll never make me a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And, he was doing the hard sales pitch, right? While Sam was kind of like just being dumb in a sense of like, I think this can keep going. Let me keep propping it up, right? But he's not like going out saying, come put your money. Sam,
granted, he did spend a lot of money on advertisements,
true,
but
but that was more, it was, how should I put it? But it's like you could still use the platform and not have any issues. Like I can go buy and trade and take out my profits.
That's the thing. Yeah, FTX itself was an actually profitable company. I think that like Celsius was like losing money the entire time because the yield they were sending us, the yield they were paying us were above what they were actually like ending up making from loaning out money. So like I think they were losing the entire time. Sam's company, I think they were profitable, but like the issue was that they granted Alameda all these special privileges, and then so much, like billions of dollars ended up being funneled to Alameda Research. Both massively problematic, both companies massively problematic. But yeah, Alex, I think, just knew the whole time that they weren't actually profitable and was telling us.
He's essentially running what, pyramid scheme, Ponzi?
Right? Yeah.
He knew.
I think Alex is closer to a Ponzi because he was literally using customer funds to pay out yield.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like, with Sam, if Alameda, whatever, if it disappeared, FTX would still go because it makes an exchange making fees, right?
He really just needed to shut down Alameda and not have like sent all that money to Alameda. Obviously, super problematic. I think people get upset at making statements like that. Obviously, Sam's company, like the amount of money lost and the scale of it was so much bigger than Celsius's, like by billions of dollars. So like more customers were harmed. I think Sam's had like almost millions of million creditors. So obviously ruined a lot more lives and much bigger in scale. But I think that just like the actual business practices of Celsius and Alex as a person, like going on every week and doing AMAs and like, just I don't know. It just feels more like dastardly to me.
For sure. All right. Final question before I let you go. Why the hell are you carrying around Kraft slices of cheese in your purse?
I'm disgusting. I recently tweeted that I had Kraft Singles, the cheese in my purse. I like snacking on garbage. I don't know. I'm like disgusting person, and I'm poor. I'm no longer making any money on YouTube, so I'm just like I buy cheap things. I just bought like a bunch of like Slim Jims in bulk to bring to me to bring with me to court. Like I just eat garbage all the time. So I'm just a disgusting person, and I will let that be known publicly.
Kraft cheese singles are not disgusting, but if they're in your bag and they start melting, then
they do melt in my bag, but they are an American delicacy.
All right, Tiff, pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate all the coverage that you're bringing everybody.
Yes, I'm going to court every single day since it's not televised, so I will be delivering daily updates on the SBF trial.
You should probably set up a Patreon or something so people can donate to you.
No, it's just hard. Like I had a Patreon for a bit and it was like good, but I kept forgetting to post on it. So I felt bad promoting the Patreon because I have like the YouTube subscription and then the Substack subscription. And then like, so I just kept forgetting about it. So I felt bad. So I'm no longer like saying that I have a Patreon because I was not updating it regularly enough. But I do have Twitter subscriptions and Substack subscriptions. And I've been posting some like excerpts of some of Sam's almost 300 pages of documents that he sent me over house arrest, as well as some like silly clips from our conversations, just silly things like talking about food and stuff like that. So I've just been posting that to subscribers. So if anyone's curious to read some of Sam's personal writings and whatever, then it's posted there. I would imagine that a lot of people are not interested though, because some people are just like, this guy needs to shut the F up. So it's a limited audience that's interested.
Well, I'm sure I'm going to have you back on soon as Caroline goes to testify and much more.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
It's going to be juicy. Yes. Appreciate you.